Welcome back to Around the 412. I am Tyler. I'm back from my hiatus, and with me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. What is going on, man? Sorry I wasn't there last week. I know, and I'm sorry that you didn't have the mic figured out. But you got it figured out this week. You sound a lot better.
I got it figured out this week. Yeah. No, last week was just like so weird from a recording perspective, like mic stuff aside, like recording that episode. If you listened to it or watched it, I'm sure you noticed like it's just so hard to record a show by yourself. Like you're just having like a dialogue. And Eddie texted me. He was like, dude, you sound like a substitute teacher on this episode right now, which is probably a pretty good comparison. I went back and listened to it. And I was like, man, not just from like an all audio standpoint, which by the way, shout out to Eddie for getting that show to sound even somewhat decent enough to put out. But yeah, back this week. Excited that you're back to actually have a conversation with you about what's been going on in the world of Pittsburgh sports. I'm not excited for what we have to talk about when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Coming off that win against Baltimore, I kind of thought we could potentially be riding a high for this episode, just being able to relax on a Sunday and see what the other teams do. However, the Steelers don't take care of their own business on Thursday Night Football against the Vikings. At one point in this game, trailing 29-0 in the third quarter. There's a lot to take away from this game, but let's just start on the surface with the fact that they lose 36-28.
Yeah, it's such a polar opposite of what we saw on Sunday against the Ravens last Sunday. I mean, and I was not expecting this to be as one-sided as it was, at least for three out of the four quarters. I think that watching the Ravens games, I'm like, okay, they started to figure things out, especially on defense. They started to figure things out. But when it came to the Vikings, and I knew it was going to be a tough game. I think we talked about just the fact that it's on a short week and it's in Minnesota. You have to travel there. It was going to be a tough environment no matter what. But the Steelers just looked like they were still in Pittsburgh for 3 quarters of this game. And it was a blowout right from the start, and there was not much good to take away from this game whatsoever.
Do you think that they were just like riding that much of a high? Like it was just a letdown spot because they just they emptied the tank essentially against the Ravens in that Sunday game, and they were just riding that emotional high, and then it was just a prime letdown spot? Or like, do you attribute it to, are just that much night and day difference from what they are at Heinz Field as opposed to on the road?
It could be a little bit of both. I mean, the offense had its issues, but they've had their issues the whole time. I think the biggest thing for me was the defense. They looked so good against the Ravens, especially against the run, because the Ravens are a running team. They were able to contain Lamar Jackson in that offense enough to be able to win that game. And then Dalvin Cook at one point is running for 17.9 yards a carry.
Yeah.
And that's not on like 1 or 2 carries. That's on like 10. It was ridiculous.
2 times in the last month, they've given up 200 yards rushing, and one of those wasn't against the Ravens. Detroit and Minnesota have both run for over 200 yards against them in the last calendar month. So it makes no sense to me. And it's weird that they look better in the second half once Watt and Highsmith were out of that game. Like, I don't know if it was Minnesota's offensive play calling or what it was, but going into this game, especially without Adam Thielen, how is the point of emphasis not just Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson? Like they're playing man on man and leaving whoever, a lot of the time Cam Sutton, on an island against Justin Jefferson. Why? Why is that the plan of attack defensively without Adam Thielen on the other side from him? No discredit to KJ Osborne, who had a nice game too. He had that long touchdown. But Justin Jefferson to not be the point of emphasis for this defense really made no sense.
Yeah, I have no idea why. And I get that Hayden's still out, but you think the secondary would at least put more of a spy on him specifically.
But see, that's the thing that I'm saying is like, especially with Hayden out, that's where it should come down to. We don't have the personnel. It needs to be more about the scheme than anything else. And it didn't look like it was. You don't have a guy that you can trust to go one-on-one with Justin Jefferson. I don't think that you have that guy even if Joe Hayden were to play in this game. But especially when he's out, like, how is the point of emphasis not steaming up a way to slow him down? And it's not just like Justin Jefferson was going to get his regardless, but it's just they didn't even seem to have any type of way to limit him whatsoever.
No, the team as a whole just looked unprepared for this game. It was uninspired and unprepared. Right from the jump, the defense was getting gashed every single play. I mean, I just looked and Dalvin Cook finished for 7.6 yards a carry.
That's like a college number.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good college game.
mhm.
But in the NFL, that's like almost unheard of. But he was able to do that, and they just looked lost, honestly. For especially in the first half, you're down 23-0 at halftime. It just looked like this is going to be a typical like letdown game for the Steelers. Like, I'm not saying that the Vikings are necessarily an inferior opponent to the Steelers, especially when the Steelers are on the road. But I felt like this, after the Ravens game, this should be a game that the Steelers were going to win, and this was just a huge letdown.
Well, especially without Adam Thielen, and we didn't really touch on this, but like Dalvin Cook playing in this game is kind of ridiculous in its own right. Just a week and a half after separating his shoulder, which he has a torn labrum on the other side as well. So just ridiculous. Now he's playing with that harness. And I mean, for him to do what he did, coming off that injury in such a short period of time is unbelievable, to be honest with you. But yeah, the Steelers still weren't favored in this game going into it. And I'm trying to figure out why, when you take into consideration no Adam Thielen, both their best edge rushers were missing from this game, Dalvin Cook being injured, like crazy. But then you start watching the game, and Minnesota went into this game as 5-7 record as well. But I think like 4 of their games were lost by 1 possession. Like, they very well could have the exact flip of what their record currently is. So they're not a bad football team by any means. I think that the biggest thing has been finishing games, and that's kind of what we saw in this with the Steelers almost coming back. Literally, like, we are a Harrison Smith fantastic play in the end zone on Pat Freiermuth away from, if the Steelers execute a 2-point conversion, that game going to overtime. Just a ridiculous fourth quarter from Ben and the offense, to be honest with you. I know Minnesota kind of taking their foot off the gas and playing prevent defense for a little bit of that. But once it got close, like, the offense still was humming, for that fourth quarter. And I would like to think, similarly to the Chargers game, can they feed off that? But we saw that the case going from the Chargers game to the Cincinnati game, that was not the case. So I have no reason to believe that this offense is going to show up against the Titans and continue what they did in the fourth quarter. I don't trust the offensive line enough, and that's really the biggest point of emphasis for me. And, we're going to talk about in the second segment, but especially with some of the playmakers, even when they're making plays, they do something stupid to negate it afterwards. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to say anything else about what you saw from the offense in the second half, but
to me, it's not even really the offense. I just think the biggest shame of the game is that when the offense finally figured it out, the defense couldn't manage to get them stops, because the offense would get within a score and then Minnesota would score again. And
yeah, that was that KJ Osborne touchdown.
Yeah,
really put it out of reach.
The defense was keeping the game out of reach for the offense to be able to catch up.
Yeah, they were definitely better in the second half. But one more thing before we go to a break. I think it is really getting masked how bad Presley Harvin has been at punting this year because of all the other issues. But he's been atrocious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that specifically on Sunday. I haven't really thought about it the entire season until Sunday Thursday. Sorry, force of habit. Thursday when I was watching the game with my cousins, and I'm like, they're like, this punter stinks. I'm like, you know what? He actually does.
Yeah, he does. I mean, and then it just is a shame because like Jordan Berry's having a really nice year, and he looked like they were probably neck and neck in camp. But the thing was, you spent a draft pick on Harvin. He's obviously going to win that job if it's that close. So when we come back, we'll continue talking about the Steelers. Like I said, we got a lot more to talk about with some guys specifically that I want to bring up as a result of this game. We will do so when we come back. This is Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. All right, and welcome back to Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm Smitty. That is Tyler. Let's talk a little bit more about the Steelers-Vikings game on Thursday night. I want to talk about one guy in particular who seems to have all the talent in the world, but the wherewithal, the football IQ is just not up to par with that talent. Chase Claypool, first offensive drive of the game for the Steelers, he takes a penalty that kills the drive. For whatever reason, just puts his hands in the guy's face. I know that they were kind of jawing back and forth, but he does that a lot where he gets in the defender's face after he does something, and he can't control himself. late in the game, makes a massive catch where the offense, we talked like, we didn't really talk about this, but Ray McLeod, for whatever reason, decides not to fair catch a ball. So the Steelers got to go 96 yards with no timeouts now. And they almost did it, thanks in large part to a chunk play from Chase Claypool, where he fights off a DPI to make a crazy catch.
Yeah.
Makes another catch. And this is with a running clock. There's about 35 seconds left at this point. And instead of hurrying up, rushing to the line to hand the ref the ball, he decides to get on one knee and point for the first down. I mean, somebody's got to be in his ear there even before they get on the field, or they shouldn't have to be, I guess, at this point. But from what we've seen from him, somebody probably should have been like making sure that everybody knows the situation. This is what you have to do. I know he said after the game he knew the situation. Well, I mean, if that's the case, that's even worse. But yeah, I mean, what else can we say about this guy other than he's continuously costing the team with these penalties? He's taken more penalties this year than any other wide receiver in football. And that's obviously more touchdowns than he has on the year. And now with stuff like that, where he's stopping them essentially from having another play, at least one play at the end of the game. And look at how close they got to scoring. That one play could have been the difference.
Yeah. To me, it's just immature and selfish football. I saw people online like trying to twist this to like, oh, it's the TikTok thing. It's Juju being his teammate. I'm like, no, I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think that Claypool is doing this all on his own. I just think that he is thinking selfishly. He's not thinking of the team. I don't care if he says he knew the situation. There is no way that if you know the situation that you're going to celebrate like that. You get up and you give the ball to the ref immediately. I just don't believe him when he says that. And I just think that's him being selfish.
I mean, like I said, that's worse if he does know the situation.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, man, this might be like stereotyping for wide receivers, but maybe it's like a wide receiver thing, like a little diva thing, like he wants to showboat a little bit. And I'm not saying like Claypool's like an all-around diva. He's not like T.O. or anything. But I do think that these plays are being like the pointing into the guy's face, the excessive celebration. And when I say excessive, I mean not even just the pointing when he caught the ball, but when they finally get the play off, he continues to celebrate after they spike the ball. I think that's ridiculous. Like, you are not that big of a deal, Chase Claypool. I'm sorry. You made a good play to move the chains and get the first down. However, you took like at least 10 to 15 seconds off the clock that they could have had, because it's funny. I didn't even realize he did that watching the game. I saw him catch the ball and then I was at dinner. So I was doing other things, talking to people. And then I looked down and like, there's 19 seconds on the clock. Where did the time go? And then I realized shortly after what happened when I went onto Twitter. Mm-hmm. I just think it's ridiculous that he's acting this way. You have to be smarter than that. And if you're like, if I'm Ben, I'm in his ear, like you're the leader of that offense. Like, Chase, what are you doing? You have to be smarter in these situations. That is what is going to cost you a game. Not just that moment, but all the penalties that it like shut down the offense. Not to mention he fumbled the ball on an end around when it was like a 2-yard game, but then he fumbled the ball. I just think it's ridiculous that Chase Claypool, and for the entire season, is like this. And it would be different, or actually it shouldn't be different, but it would probably be different if he was consistently dominant receiver like he should be, and like his physical build should be. But he is probably the most inconsistent wide receiver on the Steelers. And I do not even think it's close. His talent, or his potential talent, is probably the highest on the team. It's probably higher than Deontay Johnson if he put it all together. But there's some games where he's completely invisible, and that should not be the case, especially on a second-round draft pick wide receiver that has that much skill.
Yeah, I think too, like the thing is, we talked about like Ben getting in his ear, Tomlin getting in his ear, and who's to say that they aren't? We're never going to know what those conversations are like behind closed doors. But I think at some point, like when it becomes a pattern, you need to just realize that this isn't like, this is just who the guy is. Like, we're not coaching this out of him. You're not getting this out of him. Like, this is just what's going to happen. And you either have to live with that, or, I mean, we're only in year 2. I'm not saying this by any means, but like at some point move on if this continues down the line. I think that the rest of this season And obviously, like year 3, because year 3 is always like the year for wide receivers, in my opinion. Like that's like breakout year. We're seeing it with Deontay Johnson this year, but you see it like league wide. A lot of guys in year 3, that's the year that happens. They reach that full potential. Like obviously, regardless of who's going to be under center for the Steelers, next year is an absolutely massive year for Chase Claypool, not just from a production standpoint, but really like buying in to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking. So AB, as much as like the exit for AB was like a bad thing for the Steelers, the fans, and everything, AB was targeted as like I don't know if diva is the right word, but like a cry, like different things about Antonio Brown while he was on the Steelers. But I never saw Antonio Brown doing some of the things that Chase Claypool does. I don't remember a situation where Antonio Brown is, we need to clock the ball and Antonio Brown is excessively celebrating. So as much as people want to hate on Antonio Brown for the way he exited on the field, and this is just to go to show like how far Chase Claypool is going down a road, like he cannot keep doing this. Like Antonio Brown, as much as he's hated by a lot of Steeler fans, never did that kind of stuff on the field. Yeah, he threw a Gatorade cooler, but that's on the sideline. That doesn't affect the field of play. I'm trying to like wrap my head around what Chase Claypool was thinking, because I saw the video that DK was asking what did he know the situation and everything like that. And I just don't believe him. I don't know what's going through his head. And that's why
he talked about the ball. He said he only lost 1.5 seconds by celebrating.
Yeah, he's like, well, the ref was nowhere near me, so it didn't really matter anyway. So he's trying to say it's my fault, but really it's not my fault. Well, I'm sorry, Chase. I've seen many instances where players get up and literally sprint to the ref, not just wait for the ref to come to him. So I don't want to hear that excuse. He's just trying to place blame somewhere else, which is ridiculous. It's all on you, Chase, and the ref is not the problem. You were the problem in that play. No,
Trey Turner. I know Eric Kendricks like knocked the ball out of his hand or whatever, and the ref couldn't see it because of Trey Turner standing there. It is what it is, but it's like in the moment, still obviously Chase Claypool made the wrong decision, didn't have the football IQ that you would like to see from him there, and it's been a little bit of a pattern for him in terms of that. So hopefully it's the last that we see of that. Hopefully this isn't a pattern that continues. Because we'll have to start having some other conversations. But for the time being, Chase Claypool still plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm still going to be rooting for the guy. He's immensely talented. I just hope that he can put that talent all together, first of all, because, I mean, he's immensely talented, but it's not showing up every single Sunday like we'd like to see, especially in contested catch situations, though he did have a nice couple of those on Thursday night.
And that's what's sad, is he would have had if he didn't have those penalties, he would have finished with a nice game. Like we would have said, he had a pretty nice game. But
even the penalties aside, say he doesn't do the thing at the end of the game, they score, take the 2-point conversion, tie it, and then win it or something in overtime. Like we would be talking about how he was, we would be talking about how he was kind of one of the saviors for the team because of the last drive. But
this is just a glaring mark of the game, and we ignore. So he had 8 catches for 93 yards. So that is a great stat line for Chase Claypool, but I do not care about that because of what he did in that fourth quarter.
And that's fair. Moving on, though, I think that we've spent enough time talking about this. Hopefully, we don't have to spend this much time talking about this ever again when it comes to Chase Claypool. There's 2 other players I want to bring up to see if you think that there's maybe something there going forward who we saw step in. Like John LeGlue, we didn't get to talk about him last week because I was running solo on the show. Stepped in on the offensive line in that Ravens game and was probably their best offensive lineman from the point that he got onto the field for the rest of the game. And then he gets his first career start against the Vikings on Thursday night. Didn't show as well, but I think when you look at how bad the offensive line played as a whole, it's really hard to find a silver lining there. And then Montravius Adams on the defensive side. Ridiculous get off for a defensive tackle. Very athletic for a defensive tackle. And if there's like 2 spots where the Steelers need to find something without investing much capital, whether that's like a high draft pick or spending big in free agency, one of those spots is on the offensive line, and I'd argue another one of those is on the defensive line. So do you think that there's anything potentially there with John LeGlue and or Montravius Adams?
I think there could be, because they need all the help in the world, and the fact that they performed well. No, maybe it's not hard to move into a starting role or get a greater role in the offensive line or defensive line just because of how bad they have been. But if you're performing well, in them. I think there is something there. And that's not just to take away like, oh, they're only playing because the rest of everybody is doing bad, but everybody has been doing bad. So if you're doing well, I think that you you earn your spot, like John LeGlue did with starting on the offensive line. And the offensive line still stinks, but if he's doing his 1/5, then it's not as bad as it could be. And Montrevious Adams, I think that, man, the run defense stinks. So if he can help a little bit, then that's great. But man, dude, Thursday night, the defensive line was terrible, and Cam Hayward was pissed after the game.
Yeah,
and like,
but see, that's what I'm saying. We've seen that from Cam now multiple weeks throughout this season about the defense, and it's at some point it's a combination of personnel and scheme. They don't have the personnel good enough to mask a poor scheme, and they don't have a scheme good enough to mask poor personnel. And I think that it's definitely a combination of those two. Everybody knows I'm not the biggest Keith Butler fan in the world, but at the same time, you got to have the horses, and I don't think that the defense has enough horses at every single level of that defense. You don't have the linebackers to support and run. Minkah Fitzpatrick was their best run defender on Thursday night, so that's terrible. That can't be the case. And everybody wonders, why Minkah has so many missed tackles and yet leads the team in tackles. It's because the runners are getting to the third level, and that shouldn't be the case with the consistency that's happened this year. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I don't think that we're going to get an answer this year. I think they kind of need to. And I was talking about Derek. Derek. Well, he switched his name. Steelers_DB on Twitter. Derek Bell. About this in Spaces actually right before we started recording, and like we were like, man, when do you have to like think about life after Hayward, and with as much uncertainty as there is with Tuitt, and who knows if Alualu will be back or retire based off the injury that he suffered this year. Like you can make the argument about them investing in the defensive line very early in the draft, or that being like a priority in free agency.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces of this team where you have to start preparing for the future. Obviously on the offensive side, quarterback's number one, but this team as a whole is not getting any younger. And specifically in positions like the defensive line, like you see how bad it is right now. And that's with like Cam Hayward on the field, who's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. When he's gone, and say these other people are gone, are we going to be stuck like this, where we're just going to have one of the worst run defenses in the NFL for a few years? Like in this next year's draft, I feel like they have to draft a defensive tackle as like a safety net if these guys do not come back.
Mm-hmm. And see, it's unfortunate that Carlos Davis has been banged up for so much of the year, because he's a guy that like I think they like a lot, but he hasn't been able to get onto the field to show like he can be a piece. And life after Alualu. Yeah.
And then you get what you can out of guys like Loudermilk and Chris Wormley, but like I don't think they're long-term answers. I know Loudermilk was a draft pick last year, but like I don't see him as like a stud defensive lineman for the Steelers moving forward. I just think they're nice depth pieces.
Yeah,
and they were forced into these more elevated roles moving forward just because of the situation. The Steelers,
yeah, I mean, Wormley, credit to him, he's had a pretty solid year. He was unbelievable against the Ravens, but overall he's had a pretty solid year. But like you said, that's a guy that you look at and you would hope that he's a depth piece. But the thing is, all their depth has now become their starters, and that makes the guys behind them guys that shouldn't be the depth that are playing, and they are. We have a bunch of rotational pieces that just aren't good enough to be that. Shouldn't be on an NFL field at least at this point in their career. Like it would have been awesome to give Loudermilk pretty much a redshirt season because, I'm not going to say he's Cam Hayward. I don't think the coaches were trying to say that either. But like, there's a lot of similarities there from what their, the coaching staff was saying, and they want to like coach him up, and they would have loved to have given him a red shirt year. But with everything that's happened on the defensive line, he's been thrust into a position where he's got to play way more than he should. Henry Mondu should not be playing at all, let alone as much as he has. I mean, we could go on and on about this forever, but let's wrap up the Steelers talk with one more question that I have for you. And that's, after this loss Thursday, they're going to need a lot of help. But do you even have do you think the Steelers are even in the playoff mix at all at this point?
Oh, that's tough because you're playing the Titans, Chiefs, Ravens, Browns. For some reason, I'm about to say Cowboys, Browns, and you would think that if you were gonna make the playoffs, like at least a for sure spot, you would have to win 3 out of those 4 games.
Yeah, and get help. Beyond
and
that,
get help, and I just don't see that happening. To be honest, the way the season has gone, I think that the Steelers are probably going to win. They're managing to win 2 more games, then they're going to lose 2 more games, and they're going to be the only team that is going to finish literally 500 when they add an extra game to 17. So it should be almost impossible to be 500.
True,
but they're going to be 8-1, about as mediocre as you can get. Which I've said for a long time, and I said it a lot in the early season, that in the NFL, if you're not winning the Super Bowl, you might as well be as bad as possible. And 8-1 is literally the worst thing that the Steelers can do. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to probably... The Titans game is at home. Titans have been banged up. They've been losing some games. I think that the Titans are going to lose to the Steelers. I'll say the Steelers lose to the Chiefs. And then I'll say... the Steelers are going to lose to the Chiefs again, or no, lose to the Ravens in Baltimore, and then I'm going to say that they beat the Browns. And
those Browns and Ravens are flipped.
Okay,
yeah.
So they're going to beat the Browns first, and that's going to be Big Ben's send off from Heinz Field. That'll be his last game at Heinz Field, and then how poetic will it be beating the Browns again? Mm-hmm. And then they're going to lose to the Ravens, and they're going to finish 8-1.
I'm not saying that that's out of question, but the only thing that I hope happens there, because I'm on board with like the first 3, the way that plays out. But if the Ravens are already locked in, will they even play their starters in Week 18?
Maybe they don't, but
because that would be an ideal situation. We've seen the Ravens sit their and people will make the argument like, why would Harbaugh do that against the Steelers? We saw them do it 2019. They sat their starters.
Yeah.
So that's not out of question to happen. And Baltimore's, they've suffered as many injuries this year as anybody. Like they definitely could use the rest leading up to the playoffs, and it with an extra game now, 18-week season.
The sad part is I don't trust the Steelers to win the game with the Steelers backups or the Ravens backups in. I mean, maybe they do.
I mean, yeah,
they have a better chance to, but the way this season has gone, like if you're gonna wait 3 quarters to play offense. And if you're not going to stop the run at all on defense, then I don't really trust you to beat anybody, to be honest. You can't wait till the 4th quarter every week to start scoring points. And at some point, you're going to have to stop running backs from gaining 5+ yards a carry.
Yeah. That loss Thursday night sucked a lot out of me. Like I was like, if they win, I'm going to the Titans game. If they lose, I'm not going to the Titans game. So I will not be there for Steelers Titans now because of that. Like it put such a damper on my mood. Like I was like, if they win this game, I legit think that they have a shot for one of those wild card spots. Now it's like they need to go 3-1 probably and have somebody like Buffalo, Vegas, or Cincinnati go 2-2 or worse. Like we're actually 2 of those 3 to do that probably. Yeah. So a lot needs to happen. I'm surprised that the offense isn't what I'm more upset about in the last month or so. It's on the defensive side of the ball.
The offensive has had some pretty good performances overall in the last month, but the only thing I'll say is like some of the games they don't score early enough, like the Chargers in this past game. They just too little, too late. But yeah, the defense. I said it a couple weeks ago. Defense has been keeping them out of games, and it was the complete opposite of how we thought the season was going to go. The defense had to keep them in games. They're the ones keeping them out of games. 7.9 yards a carry. That's an absolute joke.
It's unfortunate. All right. Well, what's not unfortunate is the Pittsburgh Penguins went 3-0 this week. So we will transition to talk about them when we come back. We even saw Casey DeSmith. Maybe he's back. 33 save shutout performance on Saturday night against the Ducks. Wearing the new uniforms, by the way. We'll talk about that game. We'll talk about the other 2 games the Pens won this week. We'll be right back. This is Around the 412 on the DT Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. welcome back to Around the 412 on the DT Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am Smitty, and that is Tyler. Let's wrap up the show talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey team. 3-0 this past week. Obviously, that's a great thing on the surface. Things have looked pretty good. Other than the fact that we got one more injury to talk about. It wouldn't be an Around the 412 episode if we didn't get to talk about a Penguins injury. This one pretty significant. Obviously, Jake Guentzel going to miss some time with an upper body injury. He gets hurt in the Kraken game, which he also scored a hat trick in, but he took a shot up high, left the game, came back, scored 2 more goals, and now he's out week to week with an upper body injury, riding a 13-game point streak, by the way. So, you're wondering where you're going to find that offense from. Guys are going to have to step up. Right now, the short-term solution has been to jump up Kasperi Kapanen to play with Sid and Evan Rodriguez. What do you think about that line?
I thought it performed pretty well. I think it looks pretty solid. I think Kapanen works well with Sid, and I think that's a winger that he would like to. Maybe he doesn't forecheck as hard as like Guentzel would, but like I think that one line works. And Evan Rodriguez has just been a dog all season.
He can do whatever you want. Yeah, he could be the trigger man. He could be the shot first guy, or he can be a complimentary piece setting other guys up. Like he
works well on any line, any players. It doesn't matter. So I'm fine with that line. I thought they looked pretty decent on what was that, Saturday night, and. So I
thought they were really good against the Caps, the game that Kapanen scored. Saturday, I'll be quite honest with you, I was out with Eddie and Gary Morgan, host of the Pirates Fan Forum, by the way, and wasn't paying too much attention to the game. I know that it was like, man, I mean, it might have put me to sleep if I was able to watch. I know that too much wasn't happening in the game.
I mean, the Penguins scored in the first period, and then there was not much action after that.
Friend of the show, Brock McGinn, yeah.
Yep.
Who, by the way, is on pace for 20-plus goals this year now. He's got 7.
Yeah, he's had a pretty nice season so far. What's a shame, though, is that Guentzel has been on that stretch. He's, like you said, 13-game point streak, and he was the hottest player in the NHL, to be honest. Right. And then this happens in typical Penguin fashion, I must say. Getting a hot player, and then he gets injured. Of course.
Yeah, and not only for Jake, I mean, look what Sid's been doing lately. He did extend his point streak to 7 games, but he was on a 6-game point streak because of what Guentzel's been doing. Like the way that those two have found that, I mean, it really wasn't a question of if they were going to, it was when are they going to start clicking on all cylinders. When Sid came back, obviously didn't get off to the greatest start, but he's found his footing. It helped Guentzel really get going this year after he couldn't buy a goal off eBay earlier in the season. So, everything was clicking. And then, of course, Jake Guentzel has to go down with injury. So it is Kasperi Kapanen gets the first shot. I actually would have been intrigued to see a guy like Danton Heinen jump up just because of, similarly to Evan Rodriguez, he's thrived really in any role that Sullivan has asked him to play in on any line. But I don't have an issue with Kapanen being there. If that's what jump starts him, playing with Sid, and then, see if he can drop back down when Guentzel comes back and maybe continue that same level of play, if it was just a confidence thing or what. But we know Kasperi Kapanen's game. He has to be the trigger guy. He has to shoot the puck. If he's not getting 4 or 5 pucks on net a game, he's not having a successful Kasperi Kapanen game. That has to be what he does. Obviously not like the greatest defensive player, and he doesn't bring a whole lot to the team if he's not shooting the puck.
Well, luckily, his old duo partner, Malkin, he might be coming back sooner than later. He's been practicing in a non-contact jersey, but it's been a full practice.
Do we see him before Rust or Jake?
That
would be interesting.
That's the thing. Hockey's so mysterious. I don't know the severity of Rust and Jake's injuries, but it's like we know what Malkin is.
Well, from what I understand, Rust is a groin tweak, and Guentzel, I believe, is like his wrist where he blocked a shot or something. So his hand area.
Well, yeah, we know where it's at, but I'm saying we don't know if like a wrist, he could be back within like a week. He also could be back in a month or
right. Yeah, I feel like if it was broken, like they would have said, he's going on like IR, like it's not just week to week or something. So that's true.
I will say no, that at least one of those guys will come back before Malkin, but I think we could see Malkin before the New Year starts, like towards these ends of December. Some of these games, I just think that it's a great sign that he's actually with the team now, whether he's in a non-contact jersey or not. That he's actually participating in the full practices, and they're getting close. And I think that will help Kasperi Kapanen because we saw how good they were as a duo whenever they were playing together, and I think that that's going to help I think that if you have a duo of Jake and Sid, and then Kapanen and Malkin, and then put Zucker and Carter together, and
honestly,
move Heinen onto that second line,
maybe I've seen like better chemistry recently from Carter and Heinen than Carter and Zucker, because I would have agreed with you. Okay, so here's what I'll say. This is the way I was putting the lines together in my head in an ideal world. If with everybody healthy, like that's ever going to happen for the Penguins. But Sid with Jake and Rodriguez. Rust does not go back on that line.
Okay.
Malkin with Heinen and Kapanen. Carter with Zucker and Rust. And then you have that fourth line that you really don't want to touch as long as everything else is going on all cylinders of Bluder, McGinn, and Aston Reese.
I like those lines. And I think especially the way that Evan Rodriguez has been playing this year, I like it even more, because we saw it, was at the beginning of last season that Rodriguez started on the top line with Sid, and we weren't the biggest fans of it.
We had like the same reaction as like a lot of people do to like Dom Simone playing with Sid, or like Connor Sherry. We were like, he's best suited somewhere else. But the way he's been playing this year, I don't mind that at all. And listening to the other lines, having Russ with Zucker and Carter, I feel like if there's somebody that's going to kickstart Zucker, like look at what Russ has done when you dropped him down in the lineup. Like, at times playing with Gino last year and Kapanen, like he's a guy that can kickstart offense for other guys, I feel like. And Jason Zucker to me is the one, like when you're looking at it, like I know all the underlying stuff's good. He does pretty much everything besides actually score goals. But I think that Danny was right. He said in a show earlier in the week, he made a couple podcast appearances this week, by the way. Shout out to Danny, going on every show besides Around the 412. But he said, like, Zucker, we got to stop expecting him to be a $5.5 million player. Like, he's not going to return that value. We just have to accept it. And I get that. And I think that he still brings value to this team. My biggest thing is I just want to see him shoot the puck more. Like, when he is shooting the puck, it's literally right into the crest of the goaltender. Like, it's not even like dangerous shots that he's putting on goal when he is shooting the puck. And that's just completely different from the player that we've seen. I know that he's had some injuries and he's getting older from the player we saw in Minnesota, but it's just night and day.
So is Jason Zucker Dom Simone, but he gets paid $5.5 million?
Yeah,
that's essentially it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
except people don't hate him as much for some reason.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit better. Well, actually, we saw that mess with him trying to handle the puck against the Canadians a couple of weeks ago. But I would say that overall, he's a better puck handling Dom Simone, making $5.5 million.
Now everybody's gonna hate him. We compared him to Dom Simone.
Everybody and hate him more because he actually has a high price tag. So
yeah, he's probably, when you look at all 12 of the starting forwards, he's probably the only one that everybody is like saying is so underwhelming still. Because Kapanen for a while he wasn't scoring, but he's looked better in recent weeks. But Zucker, he's pretty much been the same his entire career as a Penguin. I feel like the best that Zucker looked, and listen, I'm not saying that you have to do this or that I think they're going to do this, but the best Zucker looked is whenever he first came here, he was playing with Sid. And I will still die on the hill that he should play with Sid. But I just know it's not going to happen. What's up?
Sid with Zucker and Rodriguez, which, by the way, sounds horrible on paper for Sid. Gino with Guentzel and Kapanen. Carter with Heinen and Rust. And then, of course, the fourth line.
See, that could work. The best that Zucker has ever looked with the Penguins uniform on is when he played with Sid his first few weeks here. And I'm still going to stand by that. So I think that he should play with Sid. And if there's going to be anybody on this team that could make a line with the wingers of Evan Rodriguez and Jason Zucker in his current state to work, it's going to be Sidney Crosby. Sidney Crosby he can like jumpstart anybody and he can make anybody look good. So
it just sounded funny coming out of my mouth, like once I said, because in my head I was like, I mean, this makes sense if that's what your primary goal is doing is reuniting Zucker and Sid. That'd probably be the only combinations they could go with.
I mean, you know what else probably sounded funny at one time is Sidney Crosby with Pascal Dupuis and Chris Kunitz, and look what happened with that line.
Yeah, Evan Rodriguez, I think, is like this like Pascal Dupuis 2021 version. Like I feel like that's what we're seeing right now with him.
Well, Jason Zucker definitely is not Chris Kunitz, but no. I don't think anybody on this team is.
Okay, so also we got to talk about Casey DeSmith. I mean, is he finally? Did we talk it into existence? Has he listened to?
I don't have a hat on, but I'll tip my headphones to him. We've talked a lot of crap on Casey DeSmith for the majority of the season, but rightfully so. He had been terrible, but he looked good. He got the shutout on Saturday night against the Anaheim Ducks. Maybe this is what turns around his season, and if the Penguins have Tristan Jarry the way that he's been performing on a, dare I say, Vezina level, and Casey DeSmith is a solid backup if he can perform like he did on Saturday night, it's a scary goalie duo moving forward. Now, again, we have no idea what they're going to look like when they go to playoffs. They could get swept again or whatever happens. But at least in the regular season, moving forward, the goaltending could be really good if Casey DeSmith looked like he did on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing for him, he was talking about his own performance, kind of some self-evaluation for what he was like early in the year. And he said that he was stiff and boring at the beginning of the year. I mean, he wasn't getting many opportunities in net, really only playing like the second of back-to-backs, but it's like a double-edged sword because how could Sullivan trust to put him in net, with the way that he had been playing? So,
and why would he want to take Jarry out of the net with the way he had been playing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it was kind of everything working against DeSmith, not only DeSmith's play himself, but just outside things that he can't control. But yeah, if he has found his footing, which you absolutely hope is the case, it's going to be great because you can take some of that workload off Tristan Jarry, which is really the biggest thing that we've talked about. If you want to have the best version of Tristan Jarry, you need to take some of that work away from him so he is fresh down the stretch and into playoff time. But, just from like a confidence standpoint for DeSmith, he started 2 of the 3 games the Penguins played this week. And, they weren't, that first one against the Kraken wasn't off a back-to-back. So Sullivan just gave him a shot in net. Obviously, it paid off. He wasn't really tested all that much in that game. But you look at yesterday's performance, the 33 save shutout performance where the Ducks were, in my opinion, the better team, at least in the third period. He had to stand on his head at times in this game to earn that shutout. So hopefully this is a huge confidence boost, not just for himself, but for the team when they're playing in front of him and Sullivan to go to him at times. We've made it this a conversation, a talking point on the show that the Penguins need to find a backup goaltender, and maybe it is an in-house option. And Casey DeSmith, with his last 2 performances, is showing maybe he still is the guy, even though he wasn't that great at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the Penguins over the last few weeks have been putting themselves in a good position. They started performing a lot better than they were over that
on pace
lull.
For over 100 points.
Yeah, they had that lull over. I mean, they would perform well the first 2 weeks, and they had the lull over like 3 to 4 weeks where they were kind of just treading water. They were squeaking out some points in overtime. But I think over the past couple of weeks, especially this past week, going 3-0, the previous week going 2-1 or 3-1, I think that they're starting to put it together, and the fact that they're going to be getting players back like Malkin. You're going to get Rust and Guentzel back soon. Casey DeSmith playing well. Sidney Crosby getting back into Sidney Crosby form. And then you got other guys that are performing well and performing over probably our expectations for them, like a Danton Heinen, Brock McGinn, Evan Rodriguez by far. I mean, who would have thought Evan Rodriguez, one of the best players on the team? But hopefully Jason Zucker could join them soon. But I think the Penguins are in a great position right now. They're 4th in the division. They're in a playoff picture right now. And I just got to say, looking at the division, how about the Rangers? I mean, I knew that they were going to be... I was
going to say that. You mentioned they were 4th in the division, and I was like...
listen, I knew the Rangers were doing a good rebuild, because a couple years ago or 3 years ago, they literally wrote that thing to the fans saying hey, we're going to be going through this. Right. They turned it around pretty quickly, and they're actually a pretty solid team.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about some of the long-term contracts they've handed out. Like, Mika Zibanejad's a good player, but I'm not a huge fan of that deal.
Yeah, well, I'm not a huge fan of what he's done for my fantasy team so far this year either.
But, I mean, obviously they have Panarin. They lucked into getting Lafreniere. There's no other word to describe it other than luck.
No, the ball was weighted.
Adam Fox, a stud on the back end, Norris Trophy winner last year. And then what they're getting in net was Shesterkin. Georgiev hasn't been that great, but Shesterkin's been a stud this year, one of the favorites to win the Vezina if the season ended right now. They're doing a lot of good things in New York, and they're actually on a points percentage. They played 2 less games, but they only have 1 less point than the Capitals, who are currently leading that division. So along with the Hurricanes, who we all know what start they got off to this year as well. So it's crazy that they're right in the mix with those guys. But I think that being 4th in this division right now is just, especially with the injuries the Penguins have had, and that's every year. But I still don't expect to see Mike Sullivan's name in the Jack Adams hunt.
Oh, absolutely not. It's not on brand for him.
Because Sidney Crosby's on his team.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
Ridiculous. But then if people like try to say, okay, well then why isn't Crosby like an MVP candidate even when his numbers aren't as high as McDavid? Oh, well, look at all the talent. Sullivan's his coach.
Yeah.
You can't win.
And,
if
he is an MVP candidate, be like, well, he's already an MVP candidate, so he can't win the Selke.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just always something.
That's how it works. Anything else?
What'd
you think about the jerseys? Their jerseys.
Listen, I stand by what I've always said. I think they look better on fans than they do on players.
Okay.
I think they look fine. Like, although I'm going to be honest, while I'm watching the game, they just look all black to me, and maybe that's just my eyes going bad. But like the diagonal Pittsburgh I feel like it's hard to notice too much when they're playing like at fast pace. Like, it just looks like an all black jersey for the most part.
See, I definitely agree with with them looking better on fans, but I will say I like the way that these look on the players more than like the gold alternates, and I'm torn on the white reverse retros between the black and the white reverse retros.
I think I would say the black just because I'm like partial to the nostalgia of the older ones, but I still think that they're okay. Like, they're not. I don't think they're the worst jersey in the world. But I don't think they're like, amazing. Like, for me personally, I would prefer like a retro like Robo Penguin jersey. I have always preferred those better. What the white or the black and gray one doesn't matter. But it's all right. I still stand by. I think it looks better on fans than it does on players.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that about does it. Unless you have anything else, I do want to obviously bring up some Rock Around the 412 stuff. But if you have anything unrelated, I'll save that for last.
No. The only thing I guess it's kind of related, but it's related to the show, is that we are not recording next week.
True.
It's the Christmas week, so all the podcasts have off. So this will be the last time you hear from us in 2 weeks.
So Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Kind of weird to say as we're sitting here recording right now with a couple weeks to go until Christmas, but you will not, you won't hear from us until after Christmas, right after Christmas. We might still do something, or at least I might, because obviously the Steelers are going to have that game against the Titans next week, and I don't know. So we'll see. But yeah, the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network will be on vacation next Sunday through Saturday. So the only thing podcast wise you'll find are DK's daily shots of Pirates, Penguins, and Steelers.
Which I didn't even mention in the beginning. You talked about having to record by yourself, and you did it for one show, and he does it for 3 different podcasts, like Monday through Friday. I don't know how he does it.
I don't know. Maybe I should have reached out to him when I found out I was going to record last week on my own and seen if he had any tips for me. But
I mean, listen, it was impressive listening to you do it, because I feel like if I had to record for like 25 minutes, it was just straight from me talking, it would be all over the place. Like, I feel like I'd be so unorganized.
I felt that way. I don't know if it came across that way, but I felt that way. No, but and then the last thing, because this is the last time we're going to be talking to you guys before Christmas, and it would have been regardless for the mission. Rocking Around the 412 does end Thursday. So whenever you guys are listening to this, Thursday the 16th is the last day for Rock Around the 412. It's our pinned tweet on Twitter. It takes you right to the GoFundMe where you can donate. You can read about the mission there. But I talked about the mission a lot on here. Shout out to Josh Carney again, by the way, who wrote an article about it for the Beaver County Times. If you guys haven't been able to check that out, you can read about the mission a little bit there as well. This has obviously been our biggest year. We have a real shot, in my opinion, to double what we did last year, or at least come very close to doing so. We've raised over $9,000, which is insane. Like, it's gotten to the point where my basement is just Christmas gifts, and I'm completely fine with that. I got my niece and nephew always thinking that the stuff's for them, and I got to explain to them what's going on. And then actually Amelia wanted to help wrap stuff for other kids yesterday and put their names on it. So, I mean, it's just awesome to see like my entire family get involved in doing it. I know that your mom's always asking questions about it and has been supportive with the mission as well. So shout out to everybody that plays any type of role in the mission is all in biggest shout out I could possibly give to everybody that donated any amount of money to go into the cause. You guys, I'm so excited to get you pictures and videos of the families. I always mention the number of families on here. I could just say like 9 families have been helped so far. But I think the more impactful number is to mention that 23 kids are going to have their Christmas taken care of. At the very least, this number still could grow with the days that we have left. At least 23 kids are going to have their Christmas completely taken care of, thanks to the donations that we've raised from the mission this year, which just seems absolutely insane to me. From when we started the first year raising $1,500, which was obviously, great. Shout out to everybody that donated at that time too. But to see what it's grown to today, in a time where a lot of people have financial uncertainty of their own, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And it's like people always want to give us, like you and I, praise for doing it. And it's like, listen, everybody else is donating. We just provide the gifts. So shout out to everybody who donates. My mom does the wrapping. I put labels on them. That's pretty much because I'm terrible at wrapping gifts. I would say, are you like me where if you do it, it looks like a toddler did it?
Yeah. Which, I mean, they might appreciate. I don't know, but it looks pretty professional when my mom does it. So she has her role in that, and we buy, gifts or not gifts, but prizes for people that donate. Other than that, it's every single penny that is donated from other people that is going to providing the Christmas for these kids. Don't get me wrong. I put a little something in there, but not the amounts that we see coming in from some people some of people that I've never met before, never spoken words to, or only know because of the internet. Like, just the way that everybody's willing to jump at the drop of a hat to help. The girls from Yinzers dyeing their hair because we hit a milestone. And then obviously doing the live show with me too. I mean, everybody that's had any role in this, I can't thank you enough. And things like this are why Christmas is my favorite time of year, because there's a lot of bad things that happen in this world. And around Christmas, you see a lot more good than bad. And it gets highlighted more.
Yeah. It's a great time of year, and it's great because of all of you that donated. Honestly, I mean, I don't think we can thank you guys enough. This is probably the best thing that we do. I mean, the podcast aside, like this is like our favorite thing that we have to do. And
well, real quick, if anybody that I've never shared this with, I mean, I've been on some other podcasts where they asked me about how I got into doing stuff like this, and the backstory really is, I realized quickly after starting school at CCBC that college wasn't for me. However, my 2 passions in life have always been sports and people. And with what we're doing now, where I'm able to combine those 2 things, I've found my fulfillment in life. I wake up every day like blessed to be in the position that I'm in, doing the stuff that I am, doing this show, doing the stuff with DK Pittsburgh Sports that I do aside, my job, my family, everything. But this Christmas mission that runs from July to December is my baby. This is the most important thing that I do, and it will be for as long as I'm able to do it, because it brings together every single passion that I have in my life. Helping people, obviously a little bit aside of sports because of the platform that we're using, along with the fact of the prizes that we're getting for the people that donate are all sports related. It's just a way to bring together every single passion that I have in one.
Yeah, it's great. And I think it really encapsulates like who we are and who we want to be. Like we want to help people as much as we can. We love the sports, but like this is like I said, it's our favorite thing to do. And we're not doing it because we like think it will make us look good or anything like that. Like we just genuinely want to help people.
I don't know. I mean, we record our shows on YouTube, so people know there's no way for us to look good.
That's true. That is true.
Eddie can do his best, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, but listen, guys, we've gone on for long enough of a rant about rocking around the 412. If you guys can donate, please do so. You have until Thursday to do so. If not, share the mission. You never know whose eyes and ears you can put on that thing. Like I said, we've had a ton of people that I've never even heard of donate to the mission this year, which is awesome. And I'd love to actually be able to get to know them through this. But other than that, for Smitty, for Tyler, we wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. We can't thank you enough for watching yet another episode, listening to another episode of Around the 412. Subscribe to the channel, leave us a like, leave us a comment, let us know what your thoughts are, let us know any questions you might have. Get at us on Twitter at Around the 412. For Smitty, for Tyler, we will talk to you in a couple weeks. Once again, Merry Christmas. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.